you?
Is Carl from the film Up.
From the film Up? It's good. All right. Hey, welcome to my podcast.
Well, thank you.
How's it feel to be part of the good old days?
I think we have no choice. Each of us becomes part of the good old days at some point in life.
The death and taxes, and eventually you're going to be good old days.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
So, here's my theory, Ray, about the pandemic is it's basically just given us all an opportunity to show off bookshelves and books that we have that we never, ever read.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Look here. Those
yours,
are all my wife's.
Yours looks well used, along with your Indiana Jones hat.
Oh, thank you. Those are all my wife's cookbooks.
Oh, okay.
That's why I'm about 25 pounds heavier than I was when I left the industry.
Yeah, well, that was the thing that I noticed when I retired was that I gained weight rapidly.
You weren't out beating the streets for stories.
Or being nervous, worrying about them.
That's true. Yes, sir.
Fill the hole every day.
No kidding. Hey, well, the best place to start, first of all, here's my gig, Ray, is I don't do any research and I'm just asking questions off the top of my head. So.
Oh, that's okay.
Are you a native Oregonian? Where'd you come from, sir?
I was born in Cedro-Woolley, Washington, up near in Skagit County.
Yes.
And we left there when I was 9 years old. 70 years ago. Went down to Pendleton. My dad worked for the Soil Conservation Service, and he was assigned to go over to a flood control project in Pendleton, Oregon. So we lived there for 2 years and then came to Gresham area.
Okay. And then where'd you go away to school?
BYU, Provo, Utah.
Okay. And did you major in journalism?
Well, I started out in pre-med, and then I left to fulfill a church service mission, a church mission.
Right.
And I was over in Sweden for 2.5 years. And when I came back from there, I decided, I don't know, that's going to take forever. And I don't want to spend all my time in a doctor's cubicle, type of thing. So when I was in high school, I had a Ruth Henderson, who was the biology teacher. She wrote on my reports when I'd hand in, she said, you ought to go into writing, which meant probably she was being kind and said, you are too dumb to go into science, you see. So
No.
So do the other. And so I thought,
she knew.
Well, and so I got back from Sweden and started saying, I said, well, what do I really want to do? And I thought, how can I write and earn money? And in the mid 60s, this was 1964. And so in 1964, I thought, what's growing? See? And TV news was really booming in the 60s. I thought maybe I can luck out and get a job. And so I went into what was then becoming in vogue communications.
Sure. I got one of those degrees.
Yeah, right. What do you do with that? And when I graduated, I didn't want to have to look for work, so I went to grad school back at Syracuse, New York.
Ah, good school.
They had a 15, or I guess it was a 12-month program, and I finished there. And before I left there, I'd put out feelers. I'd written, you send out resumes, as many as you can afford, and send out resumes to every TV station in Oregon and Washington and Idaho and Montana and Wyoming. And you can see I didn't hit any big markets really. And I heard back from 3 different places, and 2 of them said they wanted people right away. And I was sending them out in June, and that was, I wasn't finishing up until August. But I got one from Idaho Falls, Idaho, and they said we're losing Norm Gunning. You remember?
Oh.
You know Norm Gunning.
No, Norm well. Doesn't everybody who ever worked in TV in Portland?
I think so. And anyway, he was finishing up at Idaho State University in Pocatello, and was heading into the I think it was the Air Force. And so I came in September and took his place, and he went off to the military. And 2 other people you will know right away was Don Butler. Do you remember him?
I don't.
Don Butler was the assistant news director, and Craig Kuhlman was there. They were both Washington State grads.
Okay, a little bit ahead of my time, but
Yeah, okay. Everybody's ahead of your time, young man. And Don Butler eventually, well, Floyd Smith worked at KID where we worked while I was there, and then Tana Lang Myers
yeah,
came in after I left and worked there. So Don Butler went off with the 116th Idaho National Guard to Vietnam for a year when they were called up, and he came back and came to work at KOIN. So he was the first one, and then Craig Kuhlman, who by then was news director, a few years later he went over to KOIN, and then an opening came, and I followed to KOIN. You see, it's who you know.
yeah. Well, I learned that a lot. There are many of my former colleagues, when we find out how they got to Portland, the list of who they know and who they followed is really a who's list. So I got to stop you for a second, Ray, because I think there was a big. It should have been, you should have been a doctor, because if I was dying of cancer, I would want your voice to be the one telling me so, because it would be so soothing. And, you know, as bad as the news was, I would have been able to take it okay if it was Ray Summers.
I see.
Telling me that I had cancer.
Yeah, you will enjoy death. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So what about when did you get to Coin then? In the 70s, right?
I started at KID in 67 and then moved over here in 73.
All right. Right there after Mr. Donahue did too, right?
Donahue, yes, he came back from the military, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think KOIN had a radio station then too. Were you just strictly on the TV side?
Yeah, we were pretty well differentiated. You had, some people had a shift that went into, I had done radio and television in Idaho Falls, but when I came here, I was strictly television, yeah.
So how much hard news did you cover while you were starting out as a cub reporter at KOIN?
Well, as little as I could get away with. Yeah, it was really interesting because I came over here to cover City Hall and Multnomah County. And I did that. I came in March of 73, and I went on my first travels in June, I think it was June or July of 73. When I came over, Armstrong was the news director, and then Ted Bryant, a few months later, Ted Bryant took over as news director. So, and Ted called me in one day and said, gee, Willikers, maybe you'd like to do something like this, go around the news. I said, let me think about that. And so I started doing them in 73 and did about 2 or 3 that fall. And they'd be combined with other stories. Like we went on a road trip with Rex Pruitt, a good old boy photographer, down to Coos Bay. And the purpose of the trip was to meet up with, oh my gosh, I should have written it down. The longshoreman had, the famous guy that was the head of the longshoremen for decades, led the riots and all this type of stuff. Anyway, he was speaking to longshoremen down there. And so we went down and did a story with him and then did feature stories along with it type of thing. But
so you were famous for Ray Summers at Large, right?
Well,
when did that come around, the title?
Well, Ted Bryant said after a year of that, we need to come up with a name. He said, how about At Large? I said, I hate it. So as any good news director would say, well, you come up with a better name.
Uh-huh.
And as you see, I couldn't come up with a better name. So
you couldn't come up with Ray Summers at Bay?
Well,
or Ray Summers on the Lam?
Or is it Summers Somewhere?
Summers. That's a good one. I like that one. Well, obviously you enjoyed that part of storytelling because you did it and did it well for decades.
It was, well, it would have been 31 years almost for the major part of my work. Yeah. Except, yeah. So
that's a lot of stories.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't remember many of them.
How much did you do? So you're going to Coos Bay, you got a story to cover. How much did you just stumble across, and how much did you know was coming when you took the trip?
Well, as it built up over the years, what I would do, they allowed me to subscribe to many small town newspapers,
Sure. Okay.
and along with Eugene Register Guard, and so you'd go through them. They'd pile up on the desk until they fell off, and then I'd decide I'd better clip them. So I'd quickly spin through them and find anything that intrigued me. I'd put into a file for each of the counties,
Okay.
and then when we'd head out, I had this silly notion that people got nervous if you lined stuff up in advance. They would worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd just head out and we'd pull out, well, here's something we could try, and we'd look them up. And sometimes we didn't get it, and other times we did, type of thing. But it was pretty haphazard, I must admit.
Can you think of the best time that you just accidentally serendipitous fell into the good story?
There were so many of those. I don't know, but there was a time. Do you remember Steve Gosson?
Oh yes, he worked at 8.
Oh yeah, he wonderful photographer, just a wonderful photographer. We'd stop to get gas. We'd ask the gas station attendant what it was, and out on the coast one time they said, "Well, there's a guy down here. I forget what town we were in, but he said it's he's an inventor of something. I'm not certain what, but he's inventing things."
Mm-hmm.
So we followed his directions and got down into where he was and located him. And he said, "Yeah." And so he was going to generate electricity by wave motion. And so we did a story with him. It was very, very good. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
And he was ahead of his time because major universities are trying that right now in their research.
Well, yeah, and some people are being successful, and I think he was probably successful. But yeah, it's just a guy who had a brainstorm and he wanted to prove that he could do it. So,
well, that's a great lesson for reporters. Is you never know where that next great story is going to come from.
Yeah, there were times when Steve would go down one side of the street, we'd go into every store, and then we'd get down to the end of the block, which is usually at the outskirts of town at the places we'd stop. And he would, we'd compare notes.
Yeah.
And then we'd say, let's try this one, type of thing. So it was just talk to people.
I remember answering the phone once, and it was just a guy, and he just, I was in the sports department back then.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is a story or not, but my buddy and I, we're the biggest little league coaches in all the land. And I kind of went, what? And he says, yeah, I'm 270 and my buddy goes about 300. And then I just pictured the juxtaposition of these huge men and these little tiny kids playing baseball. That was a story. I got one of our wonderful photographers, I can't remember who, started thinking visually about it. And so not only did we have this great visual story of these big guys teaching little kids baseball, but they also had these great big hearts. And, and so it wrote itself. But if I don't answer that phone call and don't go along with the gig, I miss out on what was a wonderful story.
Yeah. Art Wright and I, have you talked with Art Wright yet?
No, sir.
Art Wright taught college before he came over to KOI, and he was at Idaho State and taught over there photography. And he came over and he was just a joy to be with. And where were we? We were somewhere over in Eastern Washington, I think. And I was looking through an evening newspaper and saw that, whoa, there's going to be a Native American dance contest over in Big Hole Battlefield in Montana. So I rang him. I said, hey, are you ready? Are you willing to get up early and we'll get over there? He said, sure. So we got up early and went across the pass there into Montana through Idaho, and he got pulled over for speeding. But the guy, we told him what we were doing. He said, "Oh, okay, go ahead." And we got down there in time, spent the day with them, and had a great time with this. So it was. You never knew where you were going to end up.
Yeah, awesome. And you mentioned, some of the photographers you've worked with. I know for anything that I did successful, it wasn't without a great photographer with a great mind for pictures and for storytelling. And I know that was the case for you as well.
Oh yeah. My job when we were out, all I was supposed to do was keep my mouth shut and carry the tripod.
And stay out of the shot.
Yeah, stay out. If they got thirsty, hand hold the microphone out of a shot if I could, with the shotgun mic, and get him drinks if he needed it, and just and keep track. And if I saw something happening out of his, because he always had his eye up to the viewfinder, if I saw something happening out of the side, sidle up to him and say, well, look to your left, and then the other thing was to, when I got back, look at the video, see what was available, and write to the video. Don't write to something I think should be there but wasn't there.
Yeah, writing to the video is the key to really good storytelling. I was really good at staying out of the shot, because they would move and I would always be walking around their backside or sometimes trying to protect them from what might hit them from the blind side.
Yeah. Well, that was true too. Yeah, very much so. Protect them whatever you could. The people would say, we never see you. And my thought was, why should you? The person's the story,
Yeah.
the other, or whatever's going on. And but they'd say, well, I recognized your voice.
Yeah, they do.
Thing.
One of the traits of your stories is you were not a stand-up guy. We did not see, even though you were traveling long places, it was rarely that we saw you in front of the camera.
Right. If there was something that caught our imagination,
Mm-hmm.
and did, and it was necessary, I did. It wasn't comfortable. Why do it? You see reporters all the time. You don't need to see me.
Yeah. Well, there was the stand-up always had there were some redeeming qualities of the stand-up. If the station paid to send you far away, they wanted to prove it by seeing you in front of the camera. If I traveled a lot when I was a sports reporter, if we were down covering the Blazers in a playoff games in Los Angeles, even if it wasn't necessary for the story, they wanted to see your butt in front of the camera so they could prove that they paid to send you down there.
Well, the difference, Carl, is you're good looking. See, and I wasn't, so they never suggested that to me. There were times, Roger Thompson and I did a story one time about underwater monopoly in the swimming pool out at Jensen Beach, one of the hotels out there. And so that put me under there. But the funny thing about that, okay,
wait a minute, did we see you in a swimsuit in a pool, Ray?
No. I wore it was back in the days in which it was about 1976 before Roger left to go to KGW. And 1976 because, but it was the day of the, what was the fabric that you could get wet and it didn't do anything? I mean, it always maintained its shape.
Spandex or lycra?
Anyway, it was old school stuff, and so no, I had a suit. I had this sports coat and pants and a shirt and tie.
Uh-huh.
And so they were under the water and everything, and we did a lead in of me looking at them, type of thing, and peering at them. Then I buttoned my jacket and walked down into the pool, straight down, kept going until my head went underwater, And then I had a air tank and a breathing mask, but he'd signal me because he had an underwater housing for a camera.
Sure.
He'd signal me when he was ready, and I would take the breathing mask out and tuck it behind me, and then look like I was just observing the game, type of going on underwater monopoly, okay, type of thing. And then when he was through, I'd put it back in my mouth and breathe for a bit, and then we'd do something else, type of thing. And then afterwards, for the closing, I came up out of the water with a piece of PVC and a windscreen and a logo on it, and then we dubbed it in later, type of thing on there.
Oh, great creativity! I remember Roger Thompson.
Yeah,
he went to Channel 8 after 6, right?
Yeah.
He actually did a story on me when I was in high school. When my brother and I took a trip in the summer of '77, where we went around the country and saw a baseball game in every park in a month with my dad. And when we got back, they did a story on us for Good Evening with Dick Klinger.
Yeah.
And Roger Thompson was the photographer on it. And I don't know why I remember that name, but 7, 8, 9 years later, when I'm working in the industry and I run into Roger Thompson, I said, "Hey, you did a story on me a long time ago."
Yeah.
Dick Klinger was really nice because we told him I was interested in getting into the business. He invited us over to watch them tape the show. And I got to meet Robin Chapman, and that was a big deal.
Yeah. Well, sure. Back in 1964, Christmas time of my junior year in college, I spent a day with Chuck Foster at KOIN. And it was interesting to compare it to when I came there, 9 years later, and the growth that had happened. We were still up on the third floor of what had used to be a very inexpensive hotel, downtown Portland. And the studio was downstairs was the old restaurant portion. But anyway, and where my desk was in the corner, that was the entire newsroom. There were 2 desks, 3 desks, and a film changing room, type of thing. Dark room to take the film out of the camera and load it in the cans and pass it on to the processors. So it's funny how you get to do those types of things.
Yeah, you were in that transfer from the film days to the video days. That made things a lot different, didn't it?
Oh, and I was so sad when I felt so bad when film was going out. I thought, oh man, we're going to lose that texture, that because the video looked too real. It looked too lifelike, and I liked the dreamy quality of the others. So.
And when I got to Channel 8 in summer of '82 was my internship. They made the complete transfer to tape, and they used to keep file tapes of all the stories, and they were on like tape number 200, hour-long tapes. And when I left, the last tape there, it was like 8,000 or something like that.
It is.
They needed a new room.
Yeah. Well, we had luckily in 82 or 3, we went to the new building type of thing. So they had a film storage room, but they've outgrown that.
So I went into the news department mostly doing feature stories. So we ended up seeing each other a lot of places out there in the field. We were often working on the same story of the day if there was something goofy going on. Yeah,
we did occasionally. There was we had one get together. You weren't along course then, but it was Pat Wilkins.
Pat Wilkins, yeah.
And then Channel 8. I think we had. I think it was still Tuttle, Jon Tuttle.
Yes.
And we had lunch together. I learned from Tuttle, don't talk when you're a group, because he didn't talk too much to it.
No.
He was great with words. Oh, what a wonderful writer he was, Jiminy.
Oh yeah, we lost him way too soon. He was. I feel it that a lot of people, talk about who influenced you, and Jon certainly did. Especially even when I was a sports reporter, just watching his stuff and the way he worked with photographers like Milt Ritter and people like that. But I said I grew up watching Jon Tuttle and Ray Summers and Pat Wilkins, and if I'm any good at this, it's because I paid attention to what they did.
Well, the funny thing, you talking about other people, the night that Underwater Monopoly aired, I'm at the station, and the phone rings, and I pick it up. Hello, Ray. This is Charles Kuralt. I'm down at the Oregon coast. He was doing the series where he did for once a week. He'd be in a different state for that entire year, and he would happen to be in Oregon. He says, Izzy Bleckman, his photographer. He said we were sitting in our motel room watching the newscast, and he said, Izzy said he's gonna walk into the water. And Kuralt said, I said, no, he's not going to do that. I said, it was downright embarrassing. They came in the next day and visited us in person, but it was kind of embarrassing because he was not a reporter involvement type of guy. And
well, you have been favorably compared to Charles Kuralt. You just did yours here in Oregon. He went a little farther around the country, but you are as distinguished as he.
Well, The nice thing about retiring is people don't remember you, and that's it's kind of nice not to have to worry about that.
Oh, so you retired, and what have you been doing? What have you been doing since then?
Nothing.
You and Jerry Seinfeld.
well, well, we've done a lot of we 5 years, 6 years ago we started traveling
Good.
a bit, and we've been to Europe 3 times and around South America and over to China. Came back from China 2 months before COVID.
Good timing.
Yeah, we got out of there just in the right amount of time. And we'd have gone somewhere this past year, but we didn't. So we soaked our money into renovating the house, getting ready to who knows what.
So while you're out there traveling, does that storytelling Ray Summers in the back of your brain just click and you see something and you just say, I wish Steve Gosson was here, we would crank that puppy out for the 5 o'clock news?
Oh yeah, I'd say that, but I don't really want to. I'd rather just sit and watch. That's the one thing I really do enjoy, and people, family members tease me because I just like to sit on a bench in the Central Plaza and watch what the town is doing, and I'm happy that way.
And you write a wonderful story in your brain and you save it for yourself.
Yeah, I may talk. In fact, I may talk to myself about it, as if I were narrating.
So when you were, when you were doing your stuff, your features mostly, and every once in a while, if you were the camera out there, they'd send you to the news story, right? I mean, a harder news story.
Well, luckily, if it were fire season, you went to parts of the state in which there were no forests. So you learned that early on. We were in when the ship went aground down there by Coos Bay.
New Carissa.
Thank you. When we were over in Harney County. It's a long way to the beach.
Yeah, tough to get there for a deadline.
Yeah, or you'd be in Wallowa, Wallowa County up in the Northeast, and the news director would call and say, "Hey, we want you to be on the talk show we're taping tomorrow." I said, "Gee, many Christmas, it'll take me all day tomorrow to get there." Yeah. So you'd get you out of that. The other thing that I want to point out, best thing about the time that I worked, they could not reach out and get you.
You didn't have a pager or a cell phone.
Well, we were given pagers soon after I got here, but out of town, they didn't work. They had not a wide grid. It was just the metropolitan area.
Yeah.
So you'd get past Hood River and you were free. Beyond Bend, they couldn't reach you. We called in every morning and night to the assignment desk,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the worst time because some of them didn't really want you out there. The assignment people, they wanted you under their control.
Yeah, you had a camera and they couldn't use it. You had a resource.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. Anyway.
So did this ever happen to you? Jim Little, I love him. He was there when I, first started out in sports and was around long enough to when I shifted over to news. Is that he would, his description of the end of our newscast was the second half hour was headlines, weather, sports, and Carl Click.
Okay.
So because I would always have the kicker, or not always, but often would have the kicker to the end of the newscast. Then sometimes you would work on a series of stories for the sweeps. You'd have a 3 or 4 part series that you would be given time to work on, and they'd be pre-produced, and that was going to be a major story that they would be able to promote. So I did that every once in a while. So there was one day where I got sent out and did my feature. So that was the end of the newscast. I had already pre-produced the series that was going to go in the middle, but late in the day there was some breaking news, and they had to send me out. So I was live at the top of the show with the breaking news. So we called that the trifecta. You had the breaking news at the top, the series stories in the middle, and the kicker at the end.
It was the Carl Click hour. What the heck?
Almost, yeah.
You had the anchors looking over their shoulder. They were worried that you were coming after them.
Yeah, that was never ever a possibility at nighttime. I found my home in the mornings.
It is the thing that as technology improved, the nice thing is when you went out on the road for a week, you didn't turn the story that night and feed it back.
Yeah.
And that was good because I swear that as you slept or as you thought about the stories that you had filmed and stuff, they ran in the back of your mind, and you considered them, so that when you got back, you kind of had a good idea as to what you were going to do with them. And so I think letting it percolate a bit
Exactly. Yeah.
was a good thing. And then as technology came, and you'd meet a SAT truck somewhere and feed back and have to turn it really fast, and they'd be having some other reporter there too feeding a hard news story, and you'd be fighting over editing space. You wouldn't really be able to log the video. You had to use the camera to play the video back and log it. It was really a mental journey that my mind was not up for.
Yeah, it was not gentle on the storytelling
No.
fiber that you sometimes needed, as you said, to percolate, to get everything out of it. Those, when you're working with those great photographers and editors, giving them time to massage it, whatever you've done writing, they're going to make it better if you give them the time to work with it.
Oh yeah, exactly. And so that was another thing they always say. When you were in town, you've got to take a lunch hour if you were sent out in the morning, because they'd always use you if you were there in the town, but you were also supposed to be writing those road trip stories so that they'd be available when you were gone the next time, to drop in whenever they needed them. And so you do a local, and then somebody might be working or might not be working on the one, but then you'd come back from that and they'd say, you need to take a lunch. I said, I can't, because you get back, you don't know what's going to happen afterward. You need to turn that story as fast as you can to give the editor time to work on it. And then I'd have lunch at 4:30, something like that. But anyway.
Yeah, we had the same thing because of the unions required that, which was, fair in the contracts. But there was no such thing as a lunch in TV news. It was basically you just, if I had a lunch, which I never did, I was at my desk eating my lunch while I was writing that story and using that extra time to make it better.
Yeah, well, I was happier if I got the story done and then ate before I got on Max to come home, type of thing.
So what do you use for creative outlets now, my friend? Besides just watching people?
No, I would, Renee would kill me. I'm really into genealogy, family histories type of stuff. And so I spend my time, this is a photo of my grandfather and all his siblings. And so I scan these. I've got 2 scanners, and I copying them off, so the next generation will have them all identified and tracked down and stuff. So I've probably got maybe 5,000 photographs.
Hey, way to go.
Yeah.
The wise words of Jon Tuttle, he always told us, if you were smart enough to sit down and talk with him, that the stories we were doing today were not just for the 5 o'clock audience. They were for people down the road who would find them and watch them, either in the newsroom archives or at the Oregon Historical Society.
Yeah.
You're kind of still doing that. You're still kind of a historian now, just for your family, right?
Yeah. And I was always glad when they shipped the film reels off to the Historical Society, because they'll at least preserve them.
Yes.
If you leave them at a station and they change ownership, they'll clean we need that room into the trash.
That has happened, my friend. That has happened, unfortunately.
Well, they cleaned out at the old station that we were at in the 70s. They moved in there in 53 when they opened KOIN, and they left there in 83. So 30 years, which I thought was a horrendous long time. They had a storage area up behind the studio they called the barn, and they just, one day, it just all got thrown into a dumpster. All these artifacts. But luckily, I grabbed Mr. Duffy's costume. The ringmaster, Frank Kincaid, had been in the 50s and 60s for Cartoon Circus.
Yeah.
And somebody else grabbed the table that had been from the High Neighbor, where they had the guests etch their names into the table and all that type of stuff. Yeah.
I know there was an uproar at 8 at some point. News director was trying to save some money and recycle some tapes. Because we'd go through those cassette tapes, they'd go through them 10 or 20 times, but they were the raw tapes shot from Rajneeshpuram.
Oh,
so there was
a whole room.
Yeah, there was a whole shelf, whole thing for all those things, because they were history. And what are those tapes? Let's get those back in the cycle. And I think people fought like crazy, so you cannot get rid of that.
Oh, gee. And then the fear is that the oxide will start going off of them, and they will eventually crumble. You need to dub them to another, keep up with technology and all that type of stuff. So
Yeah, I remember late at my time at Channel 8, they hired somebody. I think they worked for about a year, and all that guy did was go through all these file tapes and pull stuff out and save it digitally, so it does
Yeah.
exist.
yeah, and even then they say there's, it's got to be watched over and protected. So
Yes, it does. As should all your work, my friend. It should be watched over and protected and shown to people for many, many years to come. I appreciated working with you, I guess, in that same market and keeping an eye on all the great stuff you did. I know you're a modest man, but the work that you did for our state and our city is historically valuable. And as I said before, when I told people, how did I learn to write TV news stories? I said, I watched Ray Summers and some other folks. So
that's very nice. Very nice of you to say.
Well,
the nice thing was the station allowed us to put together a compilation every 6 months.
Yeah.
And of course, their purpose was to give everybody a holiday when it ran. See?
Yeah.
But for me, it was hey, you're archiving. I can put the ones I like the best in there, and it's amazing. You go back and you look and you say, oh, that was my favorite. Steve Goss and I, or not Steve Goss, but Dean Barron and I dropped in on every Friday night down by Falls City at a Grange Hall, which had been a school at one time, but a Grange Hall. Dropped in on they have a anybody can come with their instruments and they play and dance. And so we showed up there on a Friday night and they welcomed us and we did a story, and Dean Barron did such a wonderful job with the music, and we ended up with them singing Good Night Irene, Good Night Irene. Is that the one?
Good
Anyway,
night. Irene.
yeah, that one. They ended up with it in which everybody was singing, and then they cut it down until there were just two, and then they ended up, dropping it off. And he tied it together so beautiful music. I sit and I say, wow, that was a good job, Ray.
And I know, sir, how it ended, and it's the only way it should end, with these words: Ray Summers at large.
I don't know that we even used those on there. I think we had a nighttime shot of some cars going off into the distance, with the music trailing out. But anyway, yeah, it was nice having the standard Ray Summers at large with Dean Barron, Ray Summers at large with Dale Burkholz. I always like to throw the photographer's name in. We had a news director at the end, which is probably why I quit. He kept telling, he came in and he told people that we don't want to do features. They don't bring people in anymore. So I knew my days were limited. And then he told me, don't use the photographer's name on there. And I thought, you don't realize these guys deserve it. So whatever.
Yeah. Well, I learned, I heard that a lot too. But what I learned was that a good feature story, while it's not going to knock the toes off of the hard-hitting investigative journalism, it's the most teasable story. And so if you want your audience to stick around after they've watched the investigative stuff at the head of the newscast, and you say, Ray Summers is going to show you this, people stick around for that. So there was value in it. I think it took people a while to figure it out.
Well, yeah, and it leaves people realization that it's not the end of the world after all.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are good people out there.
Ray, thanks for taking the time. It's been lovely to chat with you, and so nice to hook back up. So I hope you stay healthy and well and continue telling stories in that great mind of yours for a long, long time.
Thank you, Carl.